Today, we're talking about how environment design influences customer behavior and spending. And frequently, we don't consider the psychology behind some of the design choices and atmosphere choices we make. And so, as an example, diners consumed 18% more calories in dim lighting environments, according to a recent study. So, today, you'll learn all about evidence based strategies for optimizing your bar atmosphere. Hello, and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. Before we get started, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Spot On, who provide a great modern POS solution for the bar and restaurant industry, and Starfish, who use AI to turn your books into actionable steps to increase profits. We talk a lot about menus, and we talk a lot about pricing, finances, training, all of those things. But atmosphere is actually a profit driver within your bar. And everything from lighting to music shapes how your customers experience your atmosphere, experience your bar, and it dictates their behavior. But frequently, when I talk to bar owners, I see that atmosphere design is kind of a blind spot. And the answer here is we really need to understand the psychology that we're showing our guests. Now, a lot of the statistics we're going to go over today are restaurant statistics, right? So some of these are not necessarily as applicable to bars. It depends on the type of bar you have. Obviously, from a customer psychology standpoint, from a design standpoint, a college party bar is far different than speakeasy. A high-end cocktail bar is going to be way different than a neighborhood bar. But the bottom line is, if we understand the psychology behind our atmosphere, if we understand what we're doing to our guests from a psychological standpoint, we can adjust our behavior depending upon what type of bar we have to get the results that we want. So we're going to talk through strategic layout. We're going to talk through lighting and color. We're going to talk through audio design. And then how do we integrate and implement those features? So like I said, oftentimes we don't think too much about audio, we don't think too much about lighting and color, and we don't think too much about how we lay things out from a psychology perspective. We think a lot about efficiency. We've talked a lot about efficiency. But right along with efficiency, we have to consider the psychology behind what we are doing. So we're going to start today by talking about strategic layout. Now, the physical environment triggers specific emotional states that are going to impact your guest purchase. And that's everything from how it feels, we're going to talk about color and lighting in a little bit, but just kind of what are the textures? What are the surfaces? What does it look like when your guest comes in? And within that, you'll find that spatial layout is critical for customer comfort and dining experience. That's why you go into some bars and restaurants and they feel chaotic. You go into some and they feel unwelcoming. I don't think anyone thinks that a hospital cafeteria is a welcoming environment. We've all eaten in them because, well, we're in a hospital and that's what's available. But we want to create a welcoming environment. And one of the big things here is just spacing of tables. So if we think about how many people do we fit in a space, well, we need to look at that on a per square foot basis. And what you'll find is fast food, McDonald's, something like that, you're talking about 10 square foot per seat or per person that can dine in. Versus fine dining, where in some cases we're talking 20, 25 square feet per person. So there is a range there. Now, for most bars, our happy spot is around 15 square foot per seat, per cover in our front of house. Now, obviously, at a bar, we're getting higher density than we are at tables, right? A four top, by nature, is going to take up more space than four people sitting at a bar rail. So we have a little bit of a difference there between bars and restaurants. But the bottom line here is, if you overcrowd your spaces, it's going to feel chaotic. And sometimes that's good, right? In a college bar atmosphere, maybe we want to be a little chaotic. Maybe we want people to bump into each other more. Maybe we want to create more of that natural interaction by putting tables closer together. But a lot of space in general is going to feel more elegant, more welcoming, and more adult, if you will. It's going to give people the space to have conversations amongst their tables without, feeling like the table next to them is right on top of them. But when you have too much space, it's unwelcoming. So we have to find that balance. And like I said, normally in my experience for bars, that's going to be somewhere in the 14 to 17 square foot per person range. Now, one of the most important things when we look at layout is flow. And so the first part of flow is when you walk in, what does that look like? That entry zone that you come into. Because that entry zone is really the first impression. So oftentimes we're talking about walking from your front door into a vestibule, and then from that vestibule into the front of the bar. And so both the vestibule and the front of the bar, I would count in that entry zone. And that's the first impression we're making with our guests. That's the first time they are seeing our establishment. So what does that look like? How comfortable is that? How is that formulated for them? And something we've talked about before, but I think bears mentioning here is, do you have a host stand? If you do, what's that experience look like? Do you have a proper waiting area? If you don't have a host stand, do you have a sign that says, please seat yourself? Or do you just assume that people in a bar will seat themselves? Both work depending on the situation. And in some places, one is going to work better than the other. But also when you walk in, what is the placement of the bar itself, the restrooms, and then your floor seating? Is it natural? Is there a natural flow? Is there kind of a walk path around? Can you make a circular loop around? Do you have spaces both for your guests to walk in and feel comfortable getting to a table and for your staff to walk around? So you need ease of flow both for your guests and your staff when we're looking at our traffic flow across a bar. You also need to balance privacy with sociability in your design, right? I think every bar and restaurant does well to have some corner booths, some tucked away tables. A lot of times if people are out for a romantic evening, that's what they're looking for, is that tucked away table. But also in the bar industry, it's really important that we can pull tables together, that we can make 12 tops and 15 tops when we have groups come in. Because a lot of a bar experience is about socializing outside of your group. And a lot of bar experience is about, couples coming together and spending time with each other. So we need to have a design and traffic flow that's going to balance those. So always think in design, or even if you're just looking at the way your tables are laid out, how can I optimize this for both privacy and sociability? And I will tell you right now, one of the easiest ways to do that is have a bunch of square and rectangular tables that are the same height. And a lot of people like round tables, a lot of people like high top tables, and I like round high tops. They have their purpose. But when we're really talking about the floor in a bar where people are just kind of generally sitting down and eating and drinking and enjoying themselves, square tables work really well. Booths, you can't pull them together. Tables or chairs, you can pull them all together. So think about how you're using your furniture to dictate your traffic flow to create the ability to have sociability and privacy. The other thing that you should consider, and this is really important in a bar when we're talking just about overall design, how visible are your products, right? We know that a back bar, one of the beauties of a back bar is that we're displaying our products for our guests to look at so that they can use that visual clue to help them purchase. But beyond just the product visibility, how is it? Are they lighted? Are they not lighted? What do you have going on there? And what does your back bar look like, right? There's a huge difference when you walk into a bar and that back bar is lights and LEDs and glass and mirrors versus you walk into a bar and that back bar is, old. It's hardwood. It has intricate carvings in it. There's clearly Art Deco or Victorian sense to that back bar. And obviously, depending on where you are, those are going to be different feels. Those are also going to pull in different types of guests, right? That historic back bar is more something we'd see in a historic bar, right? Makes sense in that regard. But also it's going to give a feel of age, of weight, of a lot of times more masculinity, in that a lot of those old bars are very heavy wood back bars, where modernity, you're not getting there like you would with glass and mirrors and some of those more modern back bar features. So all of this is going to play into how your guest views your establishment and the expectations they're forming in their mind. So now let's look a little bit at lighting and color, because I think lighting in particular is something that far too few people consider And we always go to the concept that we want low light. Less light is better in the bar industry. Now, to an extent, that is true. Low lighting does create intimacy. It does encourage longer stays and more spending. Whereas bright lighting stimulates quick turnover and it makes people come in, choke and puke, to use a military term, on their food and then get out the door. Now, it doesn't always mean low lighting is better in a bar environment. One thing I find quite frequently is that bars with lighting that's too low, especially if you're in a little bit of a neighborhood that's, say, not the nicest, but an average neighborhood where you have a mixed clientele, low lighting creates corners for potentially drug deals and bad things to happen that you don't necessarily want in your establishment. Bright lighting takes care of that. So you don't want lighting that's too low, but you don't want lighting that's too bright. But lower, when you edge towards lower lighting, you're creating that intimacy and you're encouraging longer stays. Now, part of this comes into what is the actual temperature of our lighting. So you have warm lighting that is a lower K value and cool lighting that is higher. When we talk about daylight lights, LED lights, things of that nature, a lot of that is more in the cool lighting spectrum. Whereas if you think old incandescent bulbs, those are more in the warm lighting spectrum. And something that's very true, people don't look good under cool day bright lights. People do look better under warm lights. So if we want to have low lighting versus bright lighting, we can also look at cool lighting versus warm lighting. In many ways, warm lighting is going to give us a lot of the same impacts as low lighting, and cool lighting will give us a lot of the same impacts as bright lighting. So you can do low lighting that's a little bit brighter but is very warm, and that's going to give you, in my opinion, the best of both worlds. So we want more of that yellow incandescent light feel, generally speaking. And in my opinion, you really want lights in that, say, 2,500 to 3,000 K range, because that yellow light is going to make people look less pale. They'll look better. And part of our job in the bar industry is to make our guests look good. So think about what types, not only how bright your lighting is, but what types of lighting you're using. Is it warm or is it cool light? And quite frankly, I think 9 times out of 10 in a bar, you want to go warmer. Always you want to go warmer. Now, statistically, what can we say about dim lighting versus less dim lighting? Well, if we look at a piece of research done in 2020 that studied the effect of light, of the color of light on customer perception and service quality, dim lighting and or warmer lighting led to 18% more calories consumed, 24% more appetizers sold, and 39% more desserts sold. So we see right there, warmer, dimmer lighting is going to cause us to sell more. It's going to raise our revenue. Another study showed that customers linger 16% longer in dimly lit environments. So if we're talking about check average, how do we raise our check average? How do we get ourselves in a better position? How do we make more revenue? Lighting is key here. And again, we want to be on the dimmer side and on the warmer side, but we don't want to have lights so dim that either people can't read your menu or that you're encouraging bad behavior in the dark corners of your bar. Now let's talk a little bit about color, because color is important here too. When we think about color, one of the best examples is, let's say, McDonald's. McDonald's is bright, it's red, it's yellow, it's white. Well, that white and that bright lighting, we just talked about that. That gets you out the door quick, right? That makes sure you choke down your food and you run. But what do red and yellow do? Well, red and yellow stimulate the appetite. And blue is going to suppress your appetite. That's according to Kessner Consulting and a study that they did. So if we know that red and yellow stimulate appetite and blue suppresses your appetite, if you sell food, you probably don't want much blue around. But you also may not want red and yellow because those, yes, they're going to stimulate appetite, but we don't want these bright colors because we do want dim lighting. So you can look at complementary colors to red and yellow that are going to be, or I shouldn't say complementary, similar colors to red and yellow that are, not as vibrant as, say, a McDonald's is doing. Warm colors in general will create energy, and cool colors promote relaxation. So think about, where can I use warm colors? Where can I use cool colors? When we talk about warm colors, that's your yellows, your oranges, your reds. Cool colors, your blues, your greens. So you can mix those, and always remember that, you may not want to go bright red, but you can do a rich maroon, or a warm color palette you can get through natural wood. Wood has a very warm feel to it. It is all in that warm color range. And you don't have to necessarily, you know, only base the colors on color psychology. Obviously, your build out how it feels, that your actual concept is going to drive some of this. But color psychology is important because you want to look at strategic color placement based on your business goals, right? If you want people to eat a lot and get out quick, the more you look like McDonald's statistically, the better off you are. But if you want people to come in, drink, and let's say you don't serve food, maybe you want some blues in there. So it's going to suppress their appetite. They're not going to be as hungry, and they're going to stay longer when you don't offer food. But always think about lighting and color when you're doing design or redesign, or even if you're just playing around with how things in your bar are to try to raise revenue. Now let's talk a little bit about audio design. And this is something I find that is often an afterthought that should be a forethought, right? One of the most important things in any restaurant or bar is your background music. And oftentimes people don't think through their background music much. But let's talk about what the actual effect is. So there was a study done on the effects of background music tempo on customer variety-seeking behavior. And one of the things they found as they were going through is that, I think we all know this. This should be just a slap you in the head simple thing. But that music tempo is easier to identify and modify than any other thing in your bar. It is very easy to play slightly different music in order to change the behavior of your guests. Now, something that is difficult in the bar industry, right? Oftentimes we have jukeboxes, so we're giving our customers some control over the music. And oftentimes we're not the highest end places in the world, right? So classical music may not be something we want to do. And so a lot of research here exists more on the restaurant side than the bar side. But you can take to heart that these common psychological reactions and how people behave are true. And most of this is not based upon type of music, right? We will talk a little bit about classical music and what that does. And again, most bars are not going to play classical music. But the speed of music is really what we're talking about. How many beats per minute that music has is going to have a large impact on your guests. So slow music, around 60 beats per minute, is going to extend your guest stay, according to studies, by 11 minutes compared to fast music at 108 beats per minute. Now, if you're not a musician, that may not mean anything to you, but you can download a metronome app on your phone and kind of get an idea for it, right? 60 beats a minute is 1 beat a second. 108's a little faster than that. If you think of something like a military march, that's going to be 120 beats per second. So the slower we are, the longer guests stay. But along with that, now partially because of the longer stay, but guests spend on average about $7 more with slow music compared to fast music. So if we go too fast, we're actually going to get our customers in and out quicker, right? We're going to turn that table quicker, but they're going to spend less. So again, part of what you have to figure out here is, what is my concept? What are my goals? And then how can I use, lighting and color and music to dictate this? Now, when it comes to genre impacts, I don't know if this surprises anyone, but classical music is going to improve people's willingness to pay premium prices. And it's not just classical, right? Jazz plays in there a little bit as well. So the older the music, the higher the price is expected to be. And classical music wins out over contemporary music as far as willingness to pay premium prices. And like I said at the top, I don't see many bars selling are playing classical music. That doesn't fit with most bar atmospheres. And faster pace tempo, as we discussed, increases your table turnover in busy periods. Slower tempo is going to increase your guest spend and length of stay. So in general, when we look at bars, our tempo range should be between between 70 and 110 beats per minute. Now, because classical music is going to increase that willingness to pay premium prices, and we kind of have a lower beats per minute range, right? A lot of rock, a lot of rap and things is going to go beyond that 110 beats. But what you can actually do, if you really think through your music, is you can create playlists. And I find personally, when you talk about things like adult alternative, that's kind of a really good spot where you're kind of getting into that slower music, but not too slow. And it's giving you some of the benefits of, say, classical or jazz, in just that it's a little bit more on tempo, and it's not going to alienate normally any of your guests. You can set up playlists where, between 2 and 5 p.m. when you're slow, you have more of a slower tempo of music. And then around happy hour, you pick the tempo up a little bit so that you can get that table turnover during your happy hour. Slow your music back down, say from 7 or 6 to 9, because that's kind of your dinner time and you want to get more appetizers, more desserts sold. And then after 9 o'clock, pick that tempo back up so that you're getting better turn, more excitement, more drinking. So you really can dictate your sales and affect your sales throughout your entire day by strategically planning the tempo of your music and the type of music you're playing. Now, I'd be remiss not to talk about volume a little bit while we're talking about music. So background noise is what your music is, right? Your music is background noise, and you need to optimize that for conversation. You want to not have the volume too high, but you want it there, you want it present, you want it in people's ears without creating ear fatigue or making them shout at each other, just to have a conversation. And the last thing I will say about music before we move on here is that it is absolutely imperative that whatever music you're playing, whatever genre, because you can really work within tempo and feel within any genre, but whatever music you're playing, make sure it is congruent with your atmosphere, right? We've talked a lot about cohesive concepts. Your music needs to fit into that cohesive concept. So how do we integrate all this and deploy it, especially if we're not redoing our bar, but we just have a bar? Well, we can combine the effect of multiple things we've talked about today. And so we can get our lighting. We may not be able to change our build out, but we can at least change our lighting and our music to match our target demographic and to match what we want the guests to do at that time. Like I said, we can have music that changes throughout the day. Matter of fact, if you have LED light bulbs that you can put in different temperatures of light, you can even change the way your lighting behaves throughout the day to get different outcomes out of your guests. And so how do we go about doing this? Well, if we can have variable music and variable lighting, we can track metrics. We can track stay, duration, and return visits. And while we systematically A/B test different atmospheric conditions. So maybe you say, okay, if my lighting is at 4,000 with this type of music, 4,000K with this type of music, I see these stay and durations. And if it's at 2,500K with this type of music, I see these average guest check and stay durations. And by optimizing that, again, you can play with different times of day. You can play with different zones within your bar. So maybe you have a game room that's brighter lit than your main bar room. Maybe you have a secluded area with some booths in the back for couples where you keep that lighting lower because it's more about privacy and having dinner back there than it is about partying. So look at zone-specific atmosphere design. Look at time of day adjustments that you can make. And then also, anytime you're having an event, look at what is the best lighting, music. How do I want this event to work? So to just summarize some statistics for you before we wrap up for the day, you're going to see 18% more calories consumed in dim lighting, 16% longer stays in dimly lit environments, 11 minutes longer stays with slow versus fast music, a $7.20 higher average check with slow music, and warm light lighting is going to encourage more lingering and spending than cool lighting. So remember, strategic lighting drives spending and duration, music tempo influences pace and turnover, and your spatial layout affects both comfort and customer behavior. Your atmosphere is a powerful marketing tool and in what helps you build the most cohesive, best guest experience from end to end that is going to wow your guests and keep them returning. So I would encourage all of you, take a look at your lighting, take a look at your music, play around with a little bit, and see how you can better use both your lighting and your music to increase your revenue, control your customer behavior, and make your bar more profitable. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.